The late afternoon sun in Detroit cast a long golden light that was both beautiful and melancholic. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air of Caleb Davis's small law office, a space with peeling paint and an exposed brick wall that spoke of history more than of neglect. Caleb ran a hand over the rough texture of the wall, its gritty surface a physical anchor to the past he was trying to protect. Outside, the street hummed with life. The rhythmic squeak of sneakers on a basketball court was a familiar soundtrack, punctuated by the joyful cries of children. A slow, soulful jazz melody wafted from a record store, mingling with the savory aroma of Big Mike's barbecue. The air was thick with the scent of community, a mix of cooking smoke and the sweet, artificial cherry pop from the corner store. This was Legacy Corner, a neighborhood that had survived decades of disinvestment, held together by the strong threads of memory and culture. Caleb was only 25, but the weight of his community's legacy already rested on his shoulders. He was a beacon of quiet purpose. His silent vengeance was a form of resistance that was both strategic and personal. He was not a man of explosive rage, but of cool, controlled indignation. His mind was a sharp tool, honed to cut through the convoluted language of the law. He had learned from the best, from the stories of Thurgood Marshall, a man who had turned the pain of discrimination into a weapon for legal justice. Caleb's fight wasn't against a person, but against the system, a faceless, insidious antagonist that hid behind bureaucratic documents and empty promises of urban renewal. His world, so carefully balanced, was disrupted by a jarring intrusion of cold, impersonal reality. It came in the form of a brightly colored notice, stark against the faded colors of Mr. James's barbershop window. The barbershop was more than a business. It was a gathering place where men had shared stories, debated politics, and watched generations grow. The notice announced that the building had been acquired by a real estate corporation, Crestview Properties, for a revitalization project. The word hung in the air, a sterile label for a sinister intent. It was an eerie echo of the policies that had bulldozed thriving black neighborhoods like Black Bottom, destroying homes, businesses, and generational wealth. The news spread like a cold fog, dampening the neighborhood's vibrant energy. Caleb felt the subtle shift in the air. The sounds of laughter grew quieter, replaced by a nervous murmur. People stopped in front of the notice, their faces etched with a familiar weariness. They had seen this story before. This bureaucratic document was not just a piece of paper. It was a physical manifestation of a systemic force that sought to erase their history and their existence. Caleb's grandmother, Lena, was the community's living historian, a woman with a mind as sharp as a tack and a memory as long as the Mississippi River. She was a keeper of secrets and a weaver of truths. She would sit on her front porch, her hands busy with a needle and thread, and recount the real history of Black Bottom. She would say that the history was not something to be read in books, but a pain that had to be felt on the skin, a legacy that echoed from generation to generation. She pointed out that the same tactics used in the past were being repeated in the present. Through her stories, the past wasn't a memory, but a haunting presence, a ghost that walked among them, threatening to repeat its destructive acts. Caleb's "What up, doe?" was more than a greeting. It was an acknowledgement of a shared history and a promise of shared resistance. As he stood in front of Mr. James's barbershop, the words on the notice blurred. He didn't see a legal document. He saw the shadow of bulldozers, the ghost of a community that was wiped from the map. He felt a deep-seated frustration, the kind that settles in your bones and fuels a lifetime of work. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that the fight was against a system, not a single villain. The battle was not a simple one, but a complex war against the phantom made tangible by paper and greed. This was the beginning of Caleb's journey. He was a lawyer, but his purpose was rooted in something deeper than jurisprudence. He was fighting for his heritage and for the promise of a future where his community could not be erased again. The vibrant culture of Legacy Corner, its slang, its music, its unity, was a victory in itself. It was a well of power from which he would draw strength. The eviction notice was not a symbol of defeat, but a call to arms, a map to his silent vengeance. He would not use violence or brute force, but the knowledge he had spent his life acquiring. His was a battle of the mind, a war fought in courtrooms and in the quiet of his office, where the scent of old paper and the echoes of his grandmother's stories were his most powerful weapons. The abstract threat of the previous day's eviction notice materialized with a sickening thud. The paper, cold and impersonal, was now taped to the front of Caleb's family's small electronics repair shop, Caleb's House. The business, founded with the immense effort of his late father, wasn't just a building. It was a tangible promise of a better life, a physical representation of their family's heritage. The notice cited predatory clauses from an old contract, an echo of the oppressive bureaucracy that had once swept away the Black Bottom community. The sterile bureaucratic language of the document, with its minuscule print and legal jargon, seemed designed to confuse and intimidate, to make a human tragedy feel like a simple matter of law and property. A cold fire ignited within Caleb. It wasn't a destructive rage, but a chilling, controlled fury. His fingers curled into a fist so tight that his nails bit into the palm of his hand. He felt the sting, a subtle physical manifestation of the intense emotions simmering just beneath his calm exterior. His focus narrowed, the world around him fading until only the white paper and its sterile lettering remained. This wasn't just a legal case anymore. It was a personal affront, a direct attack on his family's legacy. He could feel the weight of his father's dream in the air, a ghost of ambition and hard work, now threatened by a faceless corporation. The cool, crisp paper in his hands felt like an iceberg, and he was the fire that would melt it from within. His grandmother, Lena, studied the documents with a historian's weary gaze. Her wrinkled hands, so used to the rough texture of old fabric and the feel of a needle and thread, now handled the slick, unforgiving legal paper. She ran a hand over it, her voice a low murmur as she revealed a secret that personalized the conflict. The property had once been part of the Black Bottom. The company's tactics were an exact repetition of what had happened decades ago. The same arrogance disguised as progress, the same pain, the same silent destruction. She described the conversation with a quiet intensity, as though she were reciting a painful historical poem. The narrator's voice added, "She always said it was history repeating itself, the same pain, the same silence, and the same arrogance disguised as progress." This revelation transformed Caleb's fright from an intellectual battle into one with heart and soul. It was a struggle for his family's honor and the memory of his father. The sting in his palm echoed another deep, personal wound from his past. He had been rejected by a prestigious law school, an act of prejudice that had initially shattered his dreams. But instead of breaking him, it had redirected his path. Inspired by figures like Thurgood Marshall, who, after being denied entry to the University of Maryland Law School due to his race, went on to attend Howard University, a pillar of the civil rights movement. Caleb had enrolled in a less renowned but equally dedicated university focused on social justice. The rejection hadn't stopped him, it had focused him. It was the first act of his silent vengeance, a desire to master the oppressor's own tools to dismantle the system from within. The law, his education,
his knowledge. These were his weapons. The rejection had not diminished his power, but instead had strengthened it, guiding him toward a path where he could use his knowledge as a weapon for justice. The narrative intensified, the sentences becoming shorter and more direct. The paper was cold, the print minuscule, another eviction notice. The emotional impact of the moment was heightened by the concise, fluid style. Caleb's quiet determination, his ice fire, was a perfect embodiment of his chosen path. He wasn't seeking a violent confrontation, but a quiet, powerful accumulation of knowledge and power. The story demonstrated that vengeance was not an act of violence, but a process of learning and accumulating power. The fight was no longer just for his neighborhood, it was for his heritage and the legacy he had promised to protect. He knew deep in his bones that this fight was what he was meant to do. The paper in his hand wasn't a document of defeat, but a call to action, a map to his silent vengeance. He felt the weight of his family's history, and the cold paper in his hands felt like the very foundation of his purpose.
Caleb had entered the labyrinth. The Crestview Properties legal team, with its seasoned corporate lawyers, was a formidable adversary. They used every weapon in their arsenal: tight deadlines, a deluge of paperwork, and the sheer inertia of the legal system to try and exhaust Caleb's resources. This chapter, the heart of the hero's journey, was a test of endurance and intellect. The battle wasn't in a dramatic courtroom, but in the mundane, dusty world of legal research, a process Caleb had to transform into a tangible, sensory experience for himself and for the reader. His small office became a physical manifestation of the struggle. He was immersed in a world of paper and mold. The scent of old, damp paper filled the room. The pages themselves were thin and yellowed, rustling with a dry, whispery sound as he sorted through them. Piles of documents like ancient artifacts stacked up around him, each a physical testament to the bureaucratic battle he was waging. The monotonous hum of a photocopier and the hollow echo of his own footsteps in the empty courthouse hallways created a tense, isolating atmosphere. It was a fight against the system's own inertia, a battle of endurance as much as a legal one. In his meticulous work, Caleb found old maps and records detailing the demolition of Black Bottom, unearthing documents that showed how the land had been undervalued and its residents coerced into selling. He discovered a legal loophole, a small crack in the seemingly impenetrable facade of the corporate machine, an old zoning decision from that era that could potentially nullify the company's claim. The discovery was a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness of the legal labyrinth. It was a tangible link between the past injustice and the present fight, a piece of his grandmother's history now acting as a legal weapon. He could almost feel the presence of the past, the ghost of Black Bottom guiding his hands as he sifted through the dusty archives. Caleb's journey was not a solitary one. He sought guidance from Dr. Eleanor Vance, a seasoned lawyer at a community legal clinic. Dr. Vance, a figure reminiscent of civil rights leaders like Charles Hamilton Houston and Constance Baker Motley, represented the accumulated wisdom of generations of activists who had fought for justice through the legal system. Her mentorship transformed Caleb's understanding of his fight. She taught him that the true power of the law was not in its complexity, but in its ability to serve justice. Caleb's battle mirrored the legal struggles of Thurgood Marshall, who had to meticulously review complex laws and precedents to dismantle segregation. This was Caleb's form of activism, mastering the system's own tools to achieve justice. His silent vengeance was not an act of isolation, but a collective effort, a legacy passed down from one generation to the next. The struggle was not just against a corporation, but against the arrogance of its representatives and the inertia of the legal system itself. The rustle of papers, the hum of the copier, the smell of mold, these were the sounds and scents of his war. He was a gladiator in a modern arena, and his sword was made of knowledge and his shield of perseverance.
He felt the weight of his community's hope in every document he read, in every word he wrote. He was learning to use the system against itself, a true master of the game.
Despite his tireless legal work and the discovery of the legal loophole, Caleb found himself at a bureaucratic impasse. He realized Crestview Properties would use its influence and resources to delay the process indefinitely and wear him down. The cold, sterile reality of the legal system had a final, frustrating lesson for him. The battle in court would not be enough on its own. Inspired by his mentor, Dr. Vance, and the lifelong community activism of his grandmother, Lena, he understood he needed a different kind of power. He needed the community's support to create social and political pressure. His silent vengeance had to become a collective one. He began organizing community meetings. At first, the gatherings were small and hesitant, filled with the cautious optimism of a people who had been let down before. But Caleb, standing in front of them with old maps and his grandmother's stories, began to weave a narrative that connected their past to their present. He used the maps to show how the revitalization was an eerie mirror of the demolition of Black Bottom. He used Lena's oral histories to give voice to the pain, to transform a dry historical event into a living, breathing memory that validated their current fears. This emotional link, forged in the heat of their shared pain, was what ignited the movement. The cold, sterile language of the legal world gave way to the warmth of human connection. The sterile office was replaced by the passionate, vibrant energy of a community united in purpose. With the support of local business owners like the always reliable Big Mike from the barbecue stand and a wave of young, passionate activists, the movement grew. The narrative described the sound of their voices uniting in a chorus, a powerful, resonant sound that filled the streets. Caleb saw faces determined to fight for their future and felt the firm grasp of hands clasped in solidarity. The community organized a peaceful protest in front of the Crestview Properties office, a demonstration that attracted the attention of local media. It wasn't a physical fight, but a powerful display of cultural resilience, strength, and unity. The power was not in violence, but in their collective will. The core of this chapter was the power of collective mobilization. The story's focus expanded from Caleb's singular experience to the shared collective experience of the community. The silent vengeance was truly a collective effort. Caleb's victory would not be his alone, but a triumph for a community united against a common foe. Their mobilization echoed the spirit of historical movements like the Chicago Black Renaissance and modern protests against racial injustice. The power resided not just in the law, but in a community's capacity to rise up and fight for itself. The smell of Big Mike's barbecue, the sound of the jazz music, the rough brick of the buildings, all these sensory details now felt charged with a new meaning. They were not just elements of a place, but symbols of a people's resistance. The rhythm of their steps in the protest, the determined look in their eyes, the unity of their voices, it all painted a vivid picture of a people reclaiming their story, their history, and their future. The chorus of solidarity finally forced a reaction. Pushed by the relentless negative publicity and the community's organized, unwavering mobilization, Crestview Properties was finally pressured to the negotiation table. Caleb, now a young man who had found his voice and his purpose, arrived with the full support of his mentor, Dr. Vance. He presented his detailed research and the legal loophole he had found, a vulnerability in the corporation's grand plans that he had meticulously uncovered in the labyrinth of dusty documents. The company, seeing no path to a quick and profitable victory, was forced to concede and back down. The resulting agreement not only saved his family's business, but also guaranteed the preservation and development of Legacy Corner for the community. This victory wasn't a dramatic, triumphant courtroom scene. The narrative subverted that expectation, demonstrating that true victory is often achieved through negotiation and sustained community pressure. This outcome was perfectly aligned with the idea of a vengeance that was constructive and strategic, not destructive. The systemic antagonist hadn't been destroyed, as evidenced by ongoing legal injustices in other parts of the country, but the community had proven that it could defend itself.
Caleb's true vengeance was not just legal, it was constructive. He used the visibility of his victory to found the Black Bottom Legal Clinic, a nonprofit legal clinic in the neighborhood inspired by his mentor, Charles Hamilton Houston. The clinic offered free legal assistance to small business owners and families facing evictions or other injustices, directly combating the cycle of disadvantage and lack of resources. It was a tangible, lasting act of resistance, a permanent monument to his silent vengeance. He hadn't just won a battle, he had built a fortress. The story concludes with a scene in the clinic's office, now vibrant with new, eager lawyers and interns from the community. The sound of their voices, the rustle of papers, and the hum of a photocopier now carried a different meaning. They were the sounds of justice being served, of a community building its own power structure. His grandmother Lena watched, smiling, seeing her grandson fulfill the promise of a better future. She saw the painful history of Black Bottom being redeemed, one case at a time. Caleb looked out the window at the streets he had known his whole life. He saw the same shops and people, but now there was a new hope in the air. He hadn't become a corporate lawyer. He had used his education and the law to transform his own community, redefining success and power on his own terms. The conclusion connected his individual story to broader themes like the importance of building a legacy and the resilience of a community. The journey of overcoming was continuous, and the vengeance was manifested with every new person the clinic helped. Caleb's fight was a powerful reflection on the resilience and overcoming capacity of the American Black community. His victory was a testament that true strength does not lie in violence, but in the mastery of knowledge and the ability to build and empower.